Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Local and Indie Authors. This year's annual Indie Author Day is November 3rd and 4th, but we are celebrating all week. Indie Author Day is a special event for libraries and its readers because it allows us to meet and celebrate the achievements of our local indie authors. In case you don't know, an indie author is someone who self-publishes in order to reach as many readers as possible and grow a profitable author publishing business. Today, we have a wonderful panel of indie and local writers to share their experiences. I would like to introduce Jennifer Garman, Calvin Kraft, who will be with us via the phone, Elizabeth Bell, Neil Nathan, Keisha Strand, and Sarah Snyder. Welcome and thank you all for being with us this evening. We'll start with our very first question. So tell us about yourself. Don't talk about your books just yet, but just tell us who you are as a person. So Jennifer, we'll start with you.
Hey, my name is Jennifer Garman. I am a Leesburg, Virginia resident, and I am a wife and mom of 3 kids, twins that are in 11th grade and an 8th grade daughter. We've been in the Virginia area for almost 20 years now, and we were transplants from California. I am a computer engineer by training, but have kind of made this zigzaggy road to being an author, and now I'm also a life coach.
All right. Calvin, tell us a little bit about yourself.
80 years old, have lived in Virginia 49 years, came from New York. I spent 30 years in the corporate world, and at age 55, I walked out and decided I wanted to do things that interest me instead of following everybody else. So I ended up going to cooking school, and I went to the Culinary Institute in New York, CIA, and I opened my own catering company. In 2006, I offered an article for the community paper because it seemed like it didn't have a whole lot of information, and they accepted it. And since 2006, I have submitted an article every month to the paper. I'm married 52 years, have 7 grandchildren, and I just love living in Springfield, Virginia.
I think you're all of our heroes. I wish I could just say, I'm done, and walk out. That's pretty amazing, Calvin. Thank you so much. Elizabeth, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I grew up in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains in Colorado Springs, and I came to Virginia to earn my master's degree in creative writing at George Mason University. When I graduated, I realized I would have to return my 200 library books. So instead, I found a job in the university library where I work to this day.
That's incredible. Thank you. Neil, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, viewers. I've been living in the Fairfax County for over 25 years. I have a bachelor's degree in engineering, a master's degree in information system from University of Virginia, another master's degree in public policy and administration from Northwestern University. I've been working in the technology and consulting companies around the Washington, D.C. area. Love traveling, music, reading, and most importantly, some linguistics.
Wow, thank you very much. And Keisha, tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I am a Virginia native. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. I moved to Fairfax when I went to George Mason University, and now I'm living in Manassas in Prince William County. I work for Fairfax County. I'm the clerk to the Board of Zoning Appeals. I also am a harpist. I'm a mom, a wife. I have 2 kids. I like to go camping with my family, and we like to visit a lot of the state parks. So we do a lot of adventures, and that's pretty much it.
That's a lot. Thank you very much, Keisha. All right. And last but not least, Sarah, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everybody. I'm Sarah Snyder. I am from Montana, so fellow Rocky Mountain person here. And as such, I love the outdoors, Keisha. So love that you're into the parks. I've lived in Virginia with my husband for about 22 years now. It's the longest I've ever lived anywhere. I've been a writer for 35 years. I have a strong interest in the environment, and I currently am not working in the environmental field anymore, but I am a program manager for a large technology company you may have heard of called Google.
We heard of it, maybe. That's pretty impressive. Thank you, Sarah. All right. Tell us a little bit about your books or book. We'll start with you, Jennifer.
So the title of my book, well, the first book that I wrote is called Flourish, 7 Ways Gratitude Can Transform Your Life. And my 2 subsequent books, that was published in 2020. And then my 2 subsequent books are You're Such a Blessing, as well as Thank You for Blessing My Life. And they are gifts of gratitude that are meant to be filled out with prompts leading you to be given to someone as a heartfelt gift of all they mean to you in gratitude. And the way that I came about writing my first book was I had a 7-year mystery illness that really took me down. And the way I found my way back to health was through the basis of gratitude as my anchor. And I brought in techniques of neuroplasticity and mindset, and healed in less than a month after being sick for about 7 years. And I wrote about my journey and how I healed in my book Flourish. And I wrote about the power of gratitude, and it's backed up with science, as well as stories of other people who have used gratitude to transform their lives.
I remember speaking with you at the local author book festival and just being kind of amazed by this story. And it really kind of shows you sometimes it's mind over matter. It's positive thinking. It's, that's just an incredible story, Jennifer. Just incredible. Calvin, tell us about your books and your inspiration behind them.
Okay, the first book was called The Ramblings of an Old Man. It's a composite of articles, short stories, and recipes that I wrote in connection with my cat, Miss Kitty. We didn't even know she could type, but she has 5 stories in the book, and every one of the stories has a recipe attached. Then, during the pandemic, I did my first cookbook. It's called Recipes from the Chef's Corner. It's about 150 recipes covering all sorts of dishes, and each recipe's got a little verb about where it came from or why I like it or who gave it to me. And then recently I just published The Ramblings of an Old Man, Book 2, and that is a book with 75 stories in it and 12 of my favorite recipes that I put in there. The stories they're humorous, they cover my life, our living in Danbury Forest, my children. Some of them are fiction, and then there are some that are based on fact. But I think people read it, they would enjoy it. One of the reviewers in the first book said, reading Chef Cal's book is like sitting in the kitchen with your grandpa as he tells you stories of his youth. And that's basically the way the books are composed.
Thank you. Now, are your recipes ones that you made up yourself, or you kind of taken original recipes and kind of made them your own? Calvin? I think we've lost Calvin. All right, Albie's okay. All right, moving on to Elizabeth. Tell us about your books and your inspiration behind them.
Okay. Firstly, I was inspired by places, by growing up in Colorado and wondering what it was
Sorry,
like.
I lost you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Calvin. I just asked about your recipes. Are they ones that you kind of enhance from existing recipes or recipes that you created yourself from scratch?
They're a combination of all of that. My philosophy on recipes is that they contain ingredients that you can find in your local grocery store, and that you have the equipment at home. You don't need to go buy anything special. You just need to follow the directions. Some of them are simple recipes, and some of them are a little bit more complex. And but the ultimate end of it is, I think they all taste pretty good.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for that. All right, Elizabeth. Sorry about that.
Okay. I was inspired by growing up in Colorado and wondering what it was like in previous centuries. And when I was 8 years old, my family went on vacation to Charleston, South Carolina, which is a totally different climate, culture, and architecture, but I fell in love with Charleston too. I've also been a voracious reader all my life. My favorite stories were epic historical family sagas like Colleen McCulloch's The Thornbirds and John Jakes' North and South. So I realized that if I wrote a family saga of my own, I could unite the places that I loved and the story elements I love. I could write a sweeping historical epic centered on forbidden love. My Lazar family saga, pictured behind me, follows a multiracial family struggling to understand where they belong in the young United States. 2 of the books were Editor's Choices and the Historical Novels Review, and the series begins with Necessary Sins.
How long have you been writing, Elizabeth?
I mean, I started writing stories when I was in 2nd grade, little short stories, and it took me 3 decades to write these books. I started when I was 14.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. That's just incredible. All right, thank you. And Neil, tell us about your books and your inspiration behind them.
All right. I have published one book. The name of the book is Raz Mahal, The Palace of Secrets. It's a suspense thriller. It's a fiction. It's a novel. And you might have guessed it. It's based on the famous monument in India called Taj Mahal. And my inspiration was I came across some very interesting facts about the Taj Mahal, or actually, I'll say the documentary evidences. And then I kept, searching and searching. And after a few months, or maybe almost like a year, I had an interesting collection of references and evidences. And then I started talking to, my family and friends as to what do I do with this? And then the idea came up about of writing a novel. So that's how I sort of put together a novel. So my true inspiration is actually curiosity. And then sort of a desire to what do I do with this, and kind of sharing with the general masses about what I found and how it can be told in a very interesting, entertaining story. So it's a suspense thriller. It's based on extensive research. And the thing is, the evidences around the Taj Mahal are actually embedded directly in the book. And they are actually public domain references. So it's not that I discovered something very new. It was absolutely public domain references. But that made up a very interesting story. So quickly, the story is about a maverick archaeologist. His name is Vijay Kumar. The Bureau of Archaeology, a fictitious organization, it receives a petition under what they call in India as Right to Information Act, which is similar to what we have here as Freedom of Information Act, or FOIA. And the petition asks the Bureau to sort of provide to the citizens all the evidence that makes up the current story of the Taj Mahal. As most of the people know, the story is the Mughal emperor built Taj Mahal in the memory of his wife, and it took so many years, so many architects, and so many laborers, so on and so forth. So the petition, the Right to Information Act petition, it asks Bureau to disclose the evidence. Well, seemingly benign request, but the Bureau dumps the case onto Vijay Kumar, who is kind of a maverick, reluctant archaeologist, who finds that this case is not as straightforward as it sounds. That follows mysterious deaths around the Taj Mahal, and Vijay Kumar sets on an international pursuit. trying to dig out the evidence and the mystery behind the deaths and also the hidden treasure. So the questions are, has someone set up Vijay Kumar? Is he in danger? Will he be able to unveil the truth? Or will the secret or will the truth always remain a secret or Raz? That's a Persian word for secret. So that's my work.
Wow. So a simple question about information has led to deaths and a cover up and a conspiracy and a wow. That's
Yep.
awesome. Thank you so much for that, Neil. All right. And Keisha, tell us a little bit about your book and its inspiration.
So my book is called I Need a Friend, and it is a children's book about two siblings, and they are just on a quest to find a friend. And it's a cute little story. It's actually inspired by my two kids. I am an only child, and so having two children and watching them play and watching them just have this type of bond that I never got to experience. It was like, watching it from a third party perspective was just so inspiring. And when I had them, I was like, well, they're either going to love each other or they're going to hate each other. And luckily, they love each other and they are each other's best friends. And I just thought it was so beautiful. I just wanted to kind of capture that for them. I also spent a lot of time in the library. I volunteered at my local library in Richmond when I was growing up, and I worked at the Fairfax County Public Library System for 3 years, I believe. And so I spent a lot of time around books and children's programming. So I know how important children's books are for kids and early learning and literacy. And I always just wanted my kids to be able to see themselves in a book. And so that's why I made this book, and I made it in a way. My son, he was in the first grade learning how to read, and I wanted it to be something that he could read, that he could relate to. And so I chose to make the characters animals and not people, because I wanted other kids to be able to see themselves in the characters too. So I'm pretty proud of it, and my kids love to read it. My son actually just read it to his class last week. So yeah, that's pretty much my book.
Keisha, I do feel your pain of being an only child. And I didn't think about when you have children, you get to watch that sibling kind of bonding that we didn't get to experience because I am also an only child. So yeah, I think that's a special relationship that unfortunately neither one of us will know about.
I know, I'll just get to watch it.
You get to watch it. Absolutely, absolutely. All right, and then Sarah, please tell us about your books and its inspiration.
Sure. Well, my first book was published by a traditional publisher in 1995, and it was a travel guide to Montana. It's called Scenic Driving Montana, and it's in its fourth edition now. I've had to update it remotely, but thank God for the internet, because I was able to update it using internet research. And then many years later, I wrote a memoir, which I have here, called, I don't know if you can see it. My background's kind of funny on my computer. It's called Plant Trees Carry Sheep, and it's about kind of a spiritual journey memoir, sort of like Eat, Pray, Love, but in that sort of genre, but a little bit different. And it's about 2 years that I lived at a spiritual retreat in Scotland. And so I have a follow-up book to that called The Value of Your Soul, which the title comes from a Rumi poem. I'm a great fan of the poet Rumi, who is a 13th century Sufi poet. Sufism being the mystics of Islam, and the retreat had a very Rumi-esque feel to it and a Sufi feel to it. So the follow-up book to my memoir it's kind of like Chicken Soup for the Soul stories. I learned a lot about myself living at this retreat for 2 years. And the stories in the second book are about things that happened to me, that were annoying things, and how I dealt with them, and how I could have dealt with them a little bit better if I had just maybe turned the situation around and looked at it differently. So I use Rumi poems in that to tease apart kind of the lessons learned in that. So if you like Chicken Soup for the Soul, you would like those stories. And then my latest book is called DIY Solo Retreats, and it's a handbook for how to create your space, set an intention, and get the self-care that you deserve. It's a thin book. It would go hand in hand with Jennifer's books about gratitude, because the basis for the book is really tips and tricks for if you need to spend some time, and I in my book I call it 2-hour minimum time, to reset and recharge your life. And you can use those 2 hours in any way, but it has to be a way that has a specific intention to soothe whatever you need soothing, to make a big decision, to focus on what you have in your life, to, you know, the gratitude, to do centering prayer, to learn a new language, to explore something that you haven't explored before. I've done a lot of retreating in my life. And so on my blog, I write about retreating, including travel retreating, and also just retreating in your own space. And that's what this is for. If you can't go away to retreat, you can figure out how to do it at home in your own space or out in nature.
And I like that your last book is called DIY, because it shows that you have to put in the work. It's nothing you can expect anyone around you to do. That's a really creative play on words. I like that.
Yeah, and I do a workshop on that book as well.
Mm-hmm. All right. It is time now for us to hear excerpts from your books. I'm really excited about this part. So Jennifer, we'll start with you.
Unmute.
You're muted.
Yeah,
You're
unmute
muted,
yourself.
Jennifer.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I am going to read an excerpt from my first book, Flourish. And this is titled The Abyss. Mommy, what's wrong? Are you sick again? My oldest daughter was so sweet and caring, but my mind went to my youngest. She was only 3, but I was hit with a thought that she would never remember who I was before I got sick. My twins would probably not remember much either. Tears welled up and my eyes glossed over. The relentless insomnia, anxiety, depression, and brain fog had devoured me internally, and I felt like a shell of who I once was. The worst part was that I appeared healthy, which meant that even if I did tell someone what I was going through, I wasn't taken seriously. So eventually, I stopped. This was my reality for 7 years. Countless doctors, tests, false hopes. 7 years I will never get back.
Wow, thank you very much, Jennifer. All right, Calvin, would you like to read an excerpt from one of your books?
Sure, thank you. This is a story from the first Ramblings book. It was written in February of 2008, and it's called Hot Chocolate. As I was trying to decide what to write for this month's newsletter, I was reminded that February is the month of love, wherein we express our thoughts and feelings to those near and dear to us. Some think that spending a great deal of money on cards, flowers, jewelry, and candy is the best way to express one's feelings. To others, just holding hands is all it takes to convey one's love for their beloved. For you see, love is not something that you can buy, wear, or send to someone. It is a feeling, an inner sense of being that exists between two human beings. True love, when experienced, is the greatest feeling one can ever have. It is similar to a really great cup of hot chocolate. It matters not what shape, size, or price the container, but rather it's the hot chocolate inside that makes us feel all warm and fuzzy. The happiest people don't always have the best of everything. They just make the best of everything they have. So I say to my friends, live simply, love generously, care deeply, speak kindly, and above all else, enjoy your hot chocolate. Until next time, I am Chef Cal.
That is a wonderful definition of love. Thank you so much for that. All right, Elizabeth.
Okay. Father Joseph Lazar is a dedicated young priest in 1840s Charleston, South Carolina, who nevertheless falls in love with one of his parishioners. Her name is Tessa, and she's an Irish immigrant who is unhappily married. After 7 years of friendship, Joseph and Tessa have finally admitted their true feelings for one another. They are both gardeners, and in this scene, he is on his knees grafting one of her camellias. Now, my audiobook narrator is much better at this than I am. I will not attempt to do a Charleston accent or an Irish accent. I encourage anyone listening to check out the sample of Necessary Sins on your favorite audiobook platform to hear how Joseph and Tessa really sound, but I'll just give you a taste of my writing. Tessa's voice became stronger, yet more tremulous. Are you saying you love me too? He shook his head, gripping the soil to anchor him. This is sin, Tessa. It is lust, and we must... Joseph. If he'd not already been on his knees, he would have collapsed at the sound. At once declaration, plea, and endearment. She came to him. He felt her kneeling beside him the instant before her fingers caressed his cheek, gentle as petals and shattering as an earthquake. This is not lust. Tessa's thumb hovered dangerously close to his lips. Eyes still closed, he lifted his hand and found her wrist. He meant to pull it away, but his arm refused to obey him. Then I was wrong when I told Sophie that love is never a sin. Slowly, painfully, Joseph allowed himself to gaze upon the beautiful woman before him. Tears stained Tessa's cheeks, but her eyes shone. They resembled nothing more than halos in stained glass. He swallowed. Do you understand, Tessa? We can never touch like this, ever again. Even as he swore it, he brought his other hand from the earth and slid his fingers along her slender neck into her silken hair. We can never speak like this again. But of course they do.
Wow, thank you so much, Elizabeth. That is giving very thorn birds. Thank you. All right, Neil.
All right, I'm going to read the prologue of my novel, Raz Mahal, The Palace of Secret. So the prologue has a little bit of a mystery and a little bit of a supernatural tone to it, and it gives an idea of what to come in the novel. Prologue. The dark tunnel seemed endless. The man struggled to keep going. How much longer? He was becoming impatient. He glanced at the torch in his hand. It looked as if it would die any moment. Oh no, I must find the grave chamber soon, he said to himself, and quickened his pace. But his foot struck something, tripping him. In an instant, he was lying flat on the floor of the tunnel, his back hurting. His only light source had slipped from his hand, flown, hit the tunnel wall, and died. What am I going to do now? Panic struck him as he felt something slithering over him. It has to be a snake, he thought. He lay still, holding his breath and praying as sweat trickled from his forehead. Then he felt the creature creep away and breathed a sigh of relief. His eyes were now becoming used to the darkness, but he knew it would be impossible to make it through the tunnel without the torch. Desperately searching for it, he ran his hands over the floor, finding it after a couple of blind grabs. He took the matchbox out from his pocket and tried to ignite the torch. Why is this thing not lighting? Fear gripped him again. Then he saw a soft bluish-white glow coming from the other end of the tunnel and wondered what it could be. Then he saw her. She was wearing a shimmering white gown. She smiled at him, or so he thought. From a distance, she seemed incredibly beautiful. Who is she? What is she doing here in the tunnel? As if reading his mind, she crooked her finger, beckoning him to follow. She turned around and started walking. He stood up and followed her as she almost glided over the tunnel floor. He kept following her. Every few seconds, she would glance back to make sure he was keeping up. He wanted to catch up to her, but somehow she maintained a distance between them. Soon they were in a large, round chamber that had a majestic sky-high dome. What is this place? He wondered, scanning the chamber. He was now closer to the woman. Even from behind the thin veil, the woman appeared beautiful. She had gone around the two graves in the chamber and pointed to a grave, as if asking him, "Weren't you searching for this?" Of course, that was what he was after. He stepped onto the platform, walked over to one of the graves, and tried to lift the lid, but it would not move. Perplexed, he stepped back. The woman smiled at him, and the lid opened slowly with a smooth gliding sound. The woman climbed onto the platform and moved closer to the grave. What is she doing? She stepped inside the grave and descended, as if lying down. He could not see her now. He stepped onto the platform again, slowly walked out of the grave, and peeked inside. Huh? All he could see was glittering gold and jewels. He wanted to touch the gold, but wondered, where did she go? Then a beautiful, slender hand protruded through the glittering gold that he felt the urge to touch. Hesitantly, he put out his hand. In a flash, the hand protruding from the grave grabbed him and pulled him violently into the grave, through the glittering gold and jewel, into an endless tunnel. The man thought his heart had stopped and his end was coming. Vijay Kumar screamed.
Suspense. That's more like horror. Wow. Thank you very much, Neil. All right. And Keisha.
All right. I believe I'm the only children's author here, so I'm going to try to share you all because it's a picture book. So just give me a little grace if the lighting isn't all that well, but here we go. So it says, "Brother, why are you so sad?" "I'm sad because I don't have a friend." "I will help you find a friend so that you can be happy." "How about my doll? She will keep all of your secrets." And she's got her little teddy bear there. "A doll is fine, but she isn't funny. I need a friend to make me laugh." "Then what about this silly hat? It's very funny." "A silly hat is not a friend. I need a friend to play with me." "What about the blocks? They are fun to play with." "The blocks are fun, but I have to do all the work. I need a friend to share with me." So it kind of goes on and on like that. But every time I show the silly hat at a story time, the kids always just start laughing. They love the silly hat.
Keisha, what are the animals? The siblings are what animal?
They are little bears.
Okay, bears.
Yeah.
And how did you select the bear as the animal you wanted the siblings to be?
Honestly, because it was just the easiest for me to illustrate because I did all of my illustrations myself and I
Wow.
am not an illustrator. So it was just easiest for me to use the different shapes and create the bear. It's a lot of circles, so it was easy for me.
That is incredible. Thank you so much, Keisha. All right, and Sarah.
I'm going to read a very short paragraph from chapter 1 of my memoir called Plant Trees Carry Sheep. And this was the 2 years I spent in Scotland. And this is just when I first arrived, a huge fan of British period films and American public television serials, I had always wanted to live in a British manor house on a massive country estate of bucolic pastures and ancient woodlands and serene gardens. I imagined myself surrounded by antique furniture, dining in elegance on fine china laid out on crisp linen tablecloths. I would take daily restorative walks through field and forest, followed by afternoon tea. At Braemar, this is the place I lived, that fantasy became my reality, except the Jane Austen setting seemed to be populated with Star Trek characters. At least that was my first impression. So I define Braemar, this place where I lived, as it was a miniature horror version of Downton Abbey where everybody was a servant.
There was no upstairs.
There was no, we all lived upstairs and downstairs.
Thank you for that. All right. I'm loving that we have some people putting questions into chat. Please continue to do that. At around 8 o'clock, we'll ask our panel members these questions. If you have any other questions or comments, please also put those in chat. All right. Thank you so much for reading the excerpts. Tell us a little bit about what motivates your writing practices. What would you say is your interesting writing quirk? So Jennifer, we'll start with you.
I think I have a two-part answer to this. So the first part is that I really need to be in flow to feel like I'm writing. And to be able to get into flow, I love to blast the music and dance around. And I feel like if I do that for long enough, I can just kind of shut everything off, refocus, sit down, and just get a lot out of my head onto the page. And then the second tactic that I really like is writing in groups. And this can be, I did a lot of this online pre-pandemic, actually, when I was writing my first book, where we would just get on a Zoom call and there wouldn't be any talking. Everyone would have their video on, but we'd all just be writing and typing away. And there was just something about that energy field as a group that was collective, and really inspired me to jump on for 2 hours and knock a lot out.
Wow, that's incredible. So you were ahead of the time before the pandemic even started using Zoom.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Calvin, tell us about what motivates your writing practices, and what would you say is your interesting writing quirk?
I think what motivates them is life in itself. I can be sitting or out walking and I'll hear a song or someone will say something or I see something and all of a sudden I get an idea for a story. And it grows. I'll go back, I'll type a page and leave it alone. And then next day I'll type another. It's just life in itself. And that's what I write about. The most interesting quirk I have is that I love to write humor, but I like to write humor with a twist. I'd like to, when I write my stories, sometimes I write them and I have the reader going down the road to the right, and then the last paragraph we turn left, and it has a hidden ending or something, and that's what I like to do. But mostly it's what I see and live every day, and that's what I write about.
All right. Elizabeth.
A quirk is that I like to burn a scented candle appropriate to the scene when I write. And I'm motivated by a longing to understand what it was like to live in the past and to understand people different from myself.
All right, thank you. All right, Neil.
So as I mentioned, my motivation was really curiosity, about things, facts, and then sort of doing a methodic research about that particular fact. And in this case, since I've written only one book, it was about the Taj Mahal. But then sort of, looking at that research and then thinking about a story and packaging that well. So there was a desire to package and research into a thrilling, entertaining story, and that will appeal to all ages. So the quirk would be to, I sometimes write on my iPhone because I'm sitting somewhere, traveling, and then I'm thinking about completing a chapter. I'll simply write it on my iPhone and then transfer it to, my master copy. But in terms of writing style, I like to sort of keep my reader always on the edge and keep it kind of flowing, particularly, switching the scenes and giving them kind of a sort of a shock treatment and using short, impactful sentences, that will kind of increase the tempo and pace of the novel. So.
All right, thank you. I can't believe you type on a phone. That's incredible. I can barely type a one sentence text message without tons of mistakes. I'm very impressed. All right, Keisha.
So I just kind of have like ideas, like really, because I write children's books, so most of my books are inspired by my kids, like watching them, or they'll do something and I'll be like, oh, I can write about that. And so usually I'll do the same thing. If an idea pops in my mind, I will write it down on my phone, and then as the sentences or the ideas come to me, I'll just write that sentence in the phone. I use notes, and so I'll just start a note and then I'll just keep going. And then later on, when I feel like, okay, I've got like enough pieces, I really just need to sit down and flesh this out, I'll transfer it all over to Word and I'll start working on it on my laptop. And usually I'll just I'm kind of weird. Like I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. Like I'll just keep going and just keep going. If it's like 4:30 in the morning, I'll just like crank it all out, and then the book is done. It's written. So I don't know if that's a quirk, but that's kind of how it works for me.
Wow, that's incredible. Thank you, Keisha. All right, and Sarah.
I don't know that I have any quirks, but I'm sure going to adopt some of the ones I've been hearing about. I love the idea of dancing around, and I also wish I could really write on my phone, but maybe I could take notes on my phone and voicemail, voice messages. But what inspires me to write is I've always felt like I've had stories to tell, and I love to share. I love to share what I've learned about myself, and hopes that things that I've learned about myself can help other people maybe learn about themselves as well. So I'm inspired by anything, and I just love to write.
All right, thank you. All right, our next question for everyone is, what was one of the most unexpected things you learned in creating your book or books? So Jennifer, we'll start with you.
Well, my book has a lot of scientific reference in it. And one of the things I learned is that I hate citations and I will never write a book again with citations in it. It took me hours at the end of when I thought I was completely done with everything, that I had to go back and I had to do all of my citations in Chicago style, according to my publisher. And it was brutal.
That's like being in grad school. Like, yeah. Except we didn't write books. We had to write papers, not books with citations. How many citations did you have?
Off the top of my head, it was close to 200.
Oh my goodness. That is terrible. All right, thank you. All right, Calvin, anything unexpected that you learned in creating your books?
I think the most unexpected thing is that I would correct errors, and then I'd put the book down and I'd open it the next day and there'd be more errors. They seemed to grow by themselves. Learning to edit was one of the hardest things. The other was to reference recipes, where I got them, where they're from, and pictures. I had a lot of photos in the first book and had to get releases for every one of them. So that became something of a little bit of a challenge. But I think the hardest thing was the editing, getting it done and making sure you've dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's, and put all the commas in the right spot.
Thank you very much. All right, Elizabeth.
I was surprised by just how young a boy was when he made the decision to become a Catholic priest. For centuries and in the 19th century, for my character Joseph Lazar, a boy left his home and enrolled at seminary when he was a very young teenager or even a prepubescent. Would you be able to make a life-changing decision at 12 years old?
Thank you. Yeah, that's incredible. No wonder he was having impure thoughts. He was just a kid when he became a priest.
Exactly.
All right, Neil.
Um, what I realized was, and again, this was my first book, is um, writing itself is a discovery process. I mean, you have thoughts and then you put them an idea, then you put them in a book. And while writing itself, you end up discovering a lot of things, which I had not anticipated. So it was kind of an enlightening experience that the subject about which I'm writing, actually, I learned more than I wrote about that subject. So that was very interesting. And second thing, I also experienced that I did not have to pre-think or forethink each and every aspect of the story. In fact, if you allow the story to take shape on its own, it does take place. So you have to have some idea about the story, and but once you start writing and letting the creative juices flow, actually the story will take shape on its own. So it was a very pleasant surprise that, hey, I didn't have to think the whole thing in my mind completely. Yes, you have to have some idea, but you have to also let it occur, let it take place. Yeah.
Thank you. And Keisha.
I learned a couple of things writing the book. I learned that there are different levels with children's books depending on the ages, like how the range of pages that you want your book to be in, and number of words depending on the age. So that was really interesting to look into and to figure out, because I was like, oh, I'm just going to write a children's book, but no, I had to narrow it down to what age range it was. So I was like, oh, who's this book for? And then, making sure that I had enough words, making sure that I had enough pages for that age range. Also learning about illustrating. That was very interesting. I never knew anything about illustrating. It's very expensive, which, I mean, I expect it to be, right? Illustrators, they do such great work. They should be paid for what they do. And a lot of times, like depending on their contracts, they get paid up front, because after the book sells, they oftentimes don't get any money from, the sales, depending on how they negotiate, but most of it is they get paid up front. So for looking into seeing if I was going to get an illustrator, it would have been a lot of money on my end up front. So then I had to learn what my options were of illustrating it myself, because I cannot draw. So a lot of YouTubing of how to illustrate a book when you can't draw. So I learned a lot about that.
Keisha, if you had not said you did not know how to draw, I never would have guessed that looking at those illustrations. You did a fabulous job.
Thank you.
A fabulous job. All right, thank you. And Sarah, what did you learn?
I think in terms of writing my memoir, because it was a huge departure from the first book I'd written, which was The Travel Guide to Montana, it took me 20 years to publish it for two reasons. One was I was playing around with the structure. I didn't know what type of book I wanted it to be. It started out as kind of a Bridget Jones type diary. And now it's ended up being a narration. But the second reason that it took me so long is because it required a great amount of vulnerability. And that was really scary, putting yourself out there. And I think what I learned from that was, after I did publish, I didn't die. I didn't die of embarrassment. I didn't die from feeling stupid. I didn't die from being vulnerable. So vulnerability is a good thing. So that's what I learned. It's okay to be vulnerable.
Wow. Thank you very much, Sarah. All right, it is 7:52. We probably won't get through all of our questions. I do want to try to ask two more before we open it up to our audience. What are the challenges of being a writer? So Jennifer, we'll start with you.
Ah, I think the biggest challenge for me was the discipline to sit down and write every day. And I chose to wake up early every day before there was anyone else up and just get something down on paper. My goal was 1,000 to 2,000 words a day. It didn't always happen, but I had a goal and I had a set time that I would do that. And I just kept telling myself, the more I get out on paper, the easier it'll be to whittle it down. So I just kind of had that philosophy, and I set a time and I wrote every day.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel like it's easy to write, like you just sit down and write and it just happens magically. But it is work, just based on my conversations with writers. It is actual work. And you have to set guidelines and goals for yourself and try to meet those goals. So thank you for sharing that, Jennifer. All right, Calvin, what are the challenges of being a writer?
I think the challenge is to make the story interesting, to present something that others will read and say, gee, that's interesting. I was in a writing class, a memoir class, and one of the students asked the teacher about how to write a memoir dealing with romance and without it getting too deep. And I remember I played with that for a long time. And then I wrote a story called My First Time. And it was a romantic story. And as you read it, you kept wondering, where is the chef going? Where is this guy going? He's getting too intimate. The last line told everybody that it wasn't about romance. It was actually how to make soup.
But you hooked them in with the title, My First Time.
Oh, yes. We talked about soft music, candles, the intimate kiss, everything. And then at the last line, it just said, okay, everybody, soup's done. And it was about making soup. And that, I think, is one of the biggest challenges that we face as writers, is to how to do that. And that's what I'd love to do.
All right. Thank you very much. Elizabeth, challenges.
A particular challenge I face as a historical novelist is the language use. So I can't use words or expressions that didn't exist in my character's time, which is the 19th century. And I also have to be careful using words that have different meanings now than they did then. I've studied 19th century fiction and 19th century slang dictionaries, and I also love the Oxford English Dictionary. It's great for understanding word use over time.
Elizabeth, do you have people that say that's not right? People didn't talk like that. Do you have critics that will comment on the language that you use?
Not usually.
Okay, good. How about I put anything out there?
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of any instances, but I know friends who are historical novelists, and they'll get a nasty review about something that the reviewer is the one who's in the wrong.
Oh.
People think they know more about the past than those of us who are, in it.
And actually writing about it.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Neil, challenges of being a writer.
Again, this was my first book. The writing itself was a thrilling experience. Most importantly, it's a suspense thriller, right? That means every sentence matters and counts. That means the reader cannot really lose the grip anytime, right from the beginning to the end. So how not to have loose ends anywhere, not a single loose end. So that means every sentence has to have an impact, as if you're watching a movie. So that was definitely a challenge, and it took a lot of effort. initial part of my novel had some cultural references from India and 16th century and 17th century. So the challenge was also how to retain the cultural references, but make them enjoyable to an international audience. So a lot of balancing had to be done. So the pronunciations of those words, how do I, sort of make sure that, an international reader will enjoy it. So that was that. An interesting challenge is going to be, well, in the future, how to write a sequel, and at the same time, how not to write a sequel, both. That means there are obvious reasons to write a sequel, but you tend to sort of follow the same theme and same pattern and make a sequel. So how do I sort of write a completely different story next time? That's going to be a challenge.
All right, thank you. Keisha, any challenges of being a writer?
I think my biggest challenge is just myself, like getting in my head and just like, overthinking, like, what are kids gonna like? They're not gonna like this, they're not gonna like that. Cause kids can be kind of hard, right? They can be intimidating, like doing story times or like, talking to people, talking to little kids. Because they can either, it's like hit or miss. If you don't get them, like they don't have the patience to sit there and wait until the end to see where you're going to go with this. But the good thing about kids is that usually if you keep it simple, they are very receptive to just, simple themes, simple characters that they can grab really quick and get a hold on. So usually when I get in my head, I just, stop and go like, okay, take it back to the basics and keep it simple.
I was a storytime programmer for 20 years. I have never sweated so much as sitting reading in front of 4-year-olds. They will quickly let you know if it's thumbs up or thumbs down.
Yes. And then if you don't have anything else for them, it's like, oh gosh, I got 30 minutes left.
They are a tough crowd, that is for sure. All right, Sarah, any challenges of being a writer?
I have two. One is finding the discipline to put something on the page every day. I struggle with that. And the other is the vulnerability piece that I talked about. Once you're a published writer, you're out there and open to criticism from perfect strangers. And it's hard not to take it personally.
Oh, that's a question I think I'm going to ask in the Q&A if we have time, about how do you handle the criticism that you may receive for your book, because that's really interesting, because you're right, you're putting yourself out there. How do you protect yourself as well from any negativity? Thank you for that. All right, it is 8 o'clock. My last question for the panel is, how can people buy your books? So Jennifer, we'll start with you.
So my books are all available on Amazon. If you just put in my name, Jennifer Garman, Garman, in the Amazon search, all of my books should pop up.
Thank you. Calvin, how can we find your books?
The Ramblings are on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. The cookbook, you just have to write to me, Chef Cal 007@yahoo.com, and I'll send you a form, and then you fill it out, and I'll send you the book.
All right, thank you. Elizabeth.
My Lazar Family Saga is available in print, ebook, and audio, and I've got links to the major platforms on my website, which is elizabethbellauthor.com. So lots of places.
All right, thank you. Neil.
So the book is available in multiple formats: paperback, ebook, hardcover, and also Audible. So Amazon, Apple, Audible.com, Barnes and Noble, pretty much everywhere. And I also have a website, neilnathan, NEALNATHAN.com, neilnathan.com. From there also you can see all the links. You can also reach to me.
All right, thank you. And Keisha.
I'm also on Amazon, and you can just, again, look for my name, and it's in ebook and paperback.
And then Sarah.
My books are also available on Amazon in ebook and paperback, and they're available on Barnes and Noble, and you can also order them from your favorite brick and mortar bookstore. My website is lunarivervoices.com, and it talks about my books, and have a blog that's a bit old, but I'm going to start blogging again.
Okay. Thank you, Neil, for that. If you don't mind, writers, if you could put your personal websites in chat, then what I'll do is make sure they're included when we upload the video to YouTube. Thank you very much for that. All right, so I'm looking at chat, and we did have 2 questions that I wanted to ask. The first one Marcia asks is, how do you choose actors to read for your audiobook? So I know, Sarah, you did kind of type in a response, but I would love for you all, if you have an audiobook available, to kind of talk about that process. So Sarah, we'll go ahead and start with you.
I don't have any of my books on audio. I used to be a voiceover artist, so I am going to be recording my own when I get 5 free minutes, but I'll let the others talk about their process. But I do have friends that also are narrators, so.
And then Sarah, just really quickly, is it a hard process to narrate your own books?
What's difficult is having the right soundproof space, and I'm still working on that.
Okay, thank you. All right, anyone else would like to answer that question?
Yeah, sure. The process is not difficult. I produce my audiobook on acx.com, which is Amazon's platform. Pretty straightforward process. It's a long process. You get to select the type of voice that you want. You can do auditions. You can give them kind of a page or 2 to read, and people will respond with their portion, and then you can select. So definitely, it's just a very useful process. You can think, what kind of narrator I want. For example, in my case, I wanted an international sounding voice, as neutral as possible. So I went for somebody who is actually of German origin and is living in the United States. It's kind of a neutral, broad kind of voice. So I think lots of choices, and the process is not that difficult.
I found it difficult. It was a long process, lots of stress of finding the right voice who could do all the accents and who could sing, and male and female voices and everything. So yeah, I actually have a couple of blog posts about how I selected the narrator I did. Yeah.
So Elizabeth, do you have one narrator that's doing all the voices?
Yes. Yeah. One really great voice actor.
Really good voice actor to do Southern and then Irish, right?
Oh yeah, that's only 2 of the 12 that he had to do.
Oh my goodness. And without divulging too much, do you have to pay these narrators?
If you're an independent author, like I think most of us are, then yes. Yeah, there's multiple payment methods as well.
Right.
But
right. Yeah.
I paid him a certain amount per finished hour of audiobook. Yeah.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to answer that question? Okay, and then we had another question from Marcia that I think we kind of touched on a little bit, but she asked about your inspirations to write and then publish. And did anyone tell you to write your stories, which is kind of interesting? Did anyone tell you or encourage you to write?
I can answer that. I taught adult ed for 14 years. And what happened is that I never took a class until one day I signed up for a memoir class. And the teacher, Louise Gibney, she was just the most fantastic person, and she got me into writing. And as she would say, a memoir is yours, and you're the only one that can write it, and you're the only one that can tell the story, and no one else can tell you it's wrong. And then she would say, sit down and just put it on paper. And I got to tell you, from the first day I took that class, every day thereafter, I write almost every day. And it was Louise who inspired me to get going and to put things down.
Anyone else?
I got encouragement from English teachers too that said I was a good writer. Yeah.
Yeah, in my case, it was essentially the very compelling references and evidence and the historical findings about the monument. And that I thought, I need to package this in some sort of a story.
Are there any other questions our guests would like to ask our writers? And while we're waiting, I'll go ahead and look at our list of questions, because this is something I'm kind of curious about. What's next for you as a writer? What are you working on now? Jennifer, we'll kick it over to you first.
I have had this scenario in my head for about a year now that is kind of futuristic sci-fi, but I'm thinking of directing it towards middle schoolers because I think that there is a big opportunity there to reach young readers, to get them engrossed in reading and excited about it again. So it's just kind of in my head right now, but there's been I guess some more dreams about it recently that I feel like it's coming sooner than later.
Thank you for that. We're losing our young people as readers, so I'm glad that you're thinking about them as you craft your next book. Thank you so much for that. Calvin, what's next? What are you working on?
Trying to write a novel. I've been playing with an idea for quite some time, and I keep going back. I have a hard time developing dialogue. And I'm also writing a book called Thursday with Louise, and it's about this fabulous woman who taught me about writing memoirs and who became a very, very dear friend and died way too soon. And I've been trying to write her story. A little bit emotional, it takes me time, but I hope to get through that. But that's what I'm doing, looking forward to completing.
Thank you, Calvin. That's a very nice tribute to your friend. Elizabeth.
As I mentioned, I spent 3 decades researching, writing, revising, and publishing the 4 books that you see, the Lazar family saga. It's Joseph and Tessa's story, and then the stories of her daughter and his nephews and the next generations. And no other characters are speaking to me the way the Lazars did. So right now I'm busy learning marketing and finding readers who will enjoy my series.
Neil.
So in my story, there are a few threads that are unrevealed, and that's by design. So more than likely, there will be a sequel. There should be a sequel. I'm kind of formulating it. I don't know whether it will be published, but yep, it's in the works.
All right, thank you. Keisha.
I am working on my next children's book that I'm going to be publishing. And it's just inspired because I want to teach kids about love. And I feel like we just need so much more love in the world. And I feel like if you can reach kids at that young age where they're, kind of impressionable, and if you can get that in their hearts young, hopefully they won't, grow away from it. So that's what my next book is about. It's going to be about a character who goes around basically spreading love. So that's going to be that. I'm also just working on self-promotion as well. I've been learning along the way, doing like local author shows. I recently did a story time at a elementary school, which was really, really good. It was such a great experience. So I'd like to tap into that a little bit more, being as my audience is children. So I definitely think I'll be doing a lot more school author visits and things like that.
Thank you, Keisha. And Sarah.
My current project is I just finished writing a pilot for a television series idea that I had. So I'm kind of getting away from the book format, and it's a lot different writing style. It's very short and truncated, and people don't speak in complete sentences. So that's hard for me to learn as a writer. And then after that, I've got a couple of other screenplays in mind and a couple of novels on the back burner I want to dust off.
Oh, thank you. And I'm looking at chat, and Marcia, I can't believe Frank McCourt was your English teacher in high school. That's very impressive. And you students encouraged him to write. That's crazy. That is crazy. I love his books. Thank you for that, Marcia. All right, we have just a few more minutes. So I do want to go back to the question of the critical feedback that you may have received about your books, and how do you handle that, especially when you're putting yourself out there with your books, which to me is like an extension of your soul. How do you handle any negative feedback? So Jennifer, we'll start with you.
That's a great question. And I channel my inner Brene Brown. By putting myself out there and being vulnerable, you have to understand that there will be criticism. And I just kind of envision that as people hiding behind their keyboards, not out in the arena fighting and, you know, taking a risk. And I just love how Brene puts it. And that's what I channel. If I ever get criticism, I tend to not even read it. And I just let it roll off my back if I do see it.
All right, thank you. Calvin.
Most of the criticism I get has nothing to do with the stories I write. It has to do with the recipes I send along with them. There are some people who can cook, and there are some people who can read, and there are some people who can't cook because they can't read. I never know. I take it as when they tell me, I say, I'm sorry, I'll ask them a few questions and just tell them it just wasn't meant to be. I've never had that problem. Most of the times because they didn't follow the directions to begin with. But the writing side, those are my memories, and I don't care what you think, they're still mine. I lived them, and that's what I wrote about. So I don't worry about that.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth.
Yeah, the negative reviews are hard. I try and let them roll off my back like water off a duck, but they don't. They haunt me. It did make me feel better. I recently listened to Patrick Stewart's autobiography, and he is still haunted decades later by bad reviews he received early in his career. So that made me feel a little bit better. It's just the artistic soul, I guess. But yeah, I take screenshots of the good ones and reread those and remind myself there's more of the good ones. So yeah.
Wonderful, thank you. Neil.
I think the best way to deal with the negative reviews is to anticipate them. And then actually make sure that your book or your work is going to kind of address those questions that you would anticipate, or the comments that you would anticipate. But other than that, I mean, it's a natural process, or it's just part of the overall writing experience and the field that we are in. It's completely all right to have negative feedback. The biggest of the biggest authors, I mean, in fact, you look them up, and there'll be complaints about what kind of editors that guy chose, So I don't worry. I mean, yes, there will be a small portion. There will be always somebody who doesn't like the book or the work or the premise or the research that has got into it. That you have to just swallow, digest it, and say thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Keisha.
Fortunately for me, my book is still kind of new. I published it in January, so it's coming up on a year, and it's not that widely known unless I go to like a fair or like I promote it myself. So I haven't had any actual negative reviews, only like positive reviews on Amazon and word of mouth. But the criticisms that I had, funnily enough, came from my family members. Like, who edited this? I would have done this, or I would have done that, or little things like that. And I always, like, with criticism, just try to like really find the truth in there. Like, you know, is this true? Is this something that I could, you know, work on or do differently the next time? And if it's actually good, solid advice, then I usually, you know, take it and try to implement it the next time. But also, you know, just keeping in mind, like someone said, you know, we're all different. And so not everybody is gonna like your stuff. There's gonna be some people who like it and some people who don't. And for me, it's just recognizing that, okay, you know, my book wasn't for that person, and that's okay because they can find something else that actually is for them. And the people who like my book will like it and they will gravitate to it. So I just kind of try to keep that in mind.
All right, thank you. And Sarah.
Yeah, just reiterating what Keisha said, there's people who aren't gonna like me, and that's okay. They're not required to like me. They're not required to like my writing, and it's my writing they're commenting on, not me. So you just have to flick it off your shoulder and move on, not let it distract you. Fortunately, I've had more positive reviews than negative, so that's good.
And I guess we just have to remember, no matter what we do, we're not going to please 100%. Never. I don't know when that's ever happened. There's always one. So we just have to remember that. Jennifer, Elizabeth, Keisha, Neil, Calvin, Sarah, thank you so much for being with us this evening. The hour and 15 minutes zipped by really quickly. I can't believe we're at the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for being here with us this evening, talking about your books and your stories, your experiences as writers. Thank you to our guests who were listening into our conversation. As I mentioned before, this event is being recorded. I will email everyone the link sometime next week. Thank you, everyone, and good night.
Thank you for
Thank
being here
you.
with us, Renee.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Renee.
Happy reading and
Bye.
writing, everybody.
Thank you.